I didn't want anyone to notice that I was anything but fine, I lied. My vision blurred for a moment. How long had it been since I'd had more than 2 hours of sleep? It didn't matter. Not tonight. Not ever again. My body knew no other rhythm than the one I had set for myself years ago when I decided to become a doctor. After a quick coffee and a pastry from the vending machine, I joined the throngs of commuters making their way to work. The train rattled along its tracks, the sound blending with the pounding in my chest. Today was different. It was my last shift at Riverside before I could finally start my fellowship in Boston. I was going to be a pediatric cardiologist. And if everything went well, I would get to operate on children and save their lives. Or maybe just help them live a little longer so they could enjoy this beautiful world a little bit more. As I neared my stop, my phone vibrated. The screen lit up with a text from Olivia, my best friend. "You coming to the loft tonight?" she asked. "Gonna celebrate?" I typed back, "Of course. Couldn't miss it for the world. Love you." I pressed send and then threw my phone into my bag. The loft was our sanctuary, a place we escaped to whenever things got too much to bear. And tonight, I needed that sanctuary more than ever. Autumn in Philadelphia passed in the blink of an eye. Crimson leaves covered the sidewalks. Cold winds slipped through the quiet streets, and I, Grace Miller, had just finished my 12-hour night shift at the Riverside Hospital Emergency Department. I walked into the kitchen, the smell of cinnamon and nutmeg hitting me like a wave of nostalgia. Back when I was a kid, I used to love baking with my mom. We would spend hours in the kitchen making cookies, laughing, talking, bonding. My dad would come in every once in a while, always with a joke that made us both roll our eyes. Those were good times, good times. Olivia was waiting for me at the island, her eyes shining with excitement. "Are you ready?" she asked, holding up 2 wine glasses. One was filled with a deep red liquid, the other with sparkling water. I took the glass from her, my fingers lingering on hers for a moment before I pulled away. "To new beginnings," Olivia toasted. "To leaving this godforsaken city," I said, taking a sip. The wine was bitter on my tongue, but the taste brought back a memory. I was 18 and I had just moved away from home to start college. I had been so excited to finally have a taste of freedom. But homesickness had hit me like a ton of bricks, and I called my parents crying. They came to visit, and after they dropped me off at my dorm, we went out for dinner. My dad ordered a bottle of wine and told me stories about his youth. And then, of course, he started to make jokes. I rolled my eyes, but there was a smile tugging at my lips. That's when I knew I was going to be okay. But there was more to this toast than just that, something that neither of us had realized until now. We were done with Philadelphia. We were done with Riverside. We were done with everything that reminded us of why we were toasting in the first place. The rest of the night passed in a blur of laughter, bad decisions, and inside jokes. By the time we got home, the sky was filled with stars. As I lay in bed, my thoughts drifted to my childhood. I remembered playing hide and seek with my sister. I remembered helping my dad fix the lawnmower. I remembered so many happy memories. Memories that I thought I had buried deep inside of me. Why did they keep resurfacing? I tossed and turned all night, the silence deafening in my ears. As the first rays of sunlight crept in through the curtains, I got up and went to the bathroom. Staring back at me from the mirror was a stranger. My eyes were red and puffy, my hair was a mess. Did I really look this broken? Was I really this upset about moving? Of course I was. I mean, I had spent half my life here. My entire medical training had been here. All my friends, my colleagues, they were all here. And I was leaving them behind. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I had planned to leave with my head held high, ready to take on the world. Instead, I was leaving defeated, hurt, and angry. I barely made it through my shift at the hospital. I was a zombie, moving from patient to patient without a purpose. I didn't care about their injuries or illnesses. I didn't ask about their families or listen to their stories. I was checked out. When the clock finally hit 7 p.m., I practically sprinted to the locker room. But before I could change out of my scrubs, Laura stopped me. "Grace, can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked. I hesitated before nodding. "Come with me," she said, leading me down a long hallway. We stopped in front of a closed door. "This is it," she said softly. "What is what?" I whispered, my heart beating faster. Laura reached out and opened the door. "Your parents are here," she said. "My parents." What were they doing here? I pushed past her and walked into the room. The sight before me made me freeze. There, sitting in chairs, were my parents, their faces etched with worry. Behind them stood a lawyer, looking just as uncomfortable as I felt. "Mom, Dad," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Grace, sweetheart, we were so worried about you," Mom said, rushing over to me. She pulled me into a tight hug, her voice breaking. "Why didn't you come home?" "You haven't spoken to us in months," Dad said, his face tight with concern. I pulled away from my mom and looked at him. "What do you want?" I snapped. My parents recoiled as if I had slapped them. "We just wanted to see how you were doing," Mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is everything okay?" "No, it's not okay," I shouted. "I haven't spoken to you in months because you left me no choice." "You left me no choice," I repeated, tears streaming down my face. "What are you talking about, Grace?" Mom asked, reaching out to touch my arm, but I swatted her hand away. "Don't touch me," I yelled. "How dare you?" Mom gasped, clutching her chest. "Grace, enough," Dad said, his voice booming. He stepped closer to me, his face inches from mine. "How dare I what?" "How dare I try to be a good father and mother?" he asked, his voice shaking with anger. "How dare I care about you?" The words hung in the air between us, heavy with emotion. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to respond. All I knew was that I hated this, hated the pain, the anger, the confusion. Dad let out a shaky breath and stepped back. "This isn't what I wanted," he said, his voice cracking. "Me neither," I whispered. There was a long pause, a pregnant silence that stretched on forever. Finally, my mom broke the quiet. "Can we talk about this later?" she asked, her voice strained. "Later," I said bitterly. "There's no later. This is goodbye." And with that, I turned and walked out of the room. I could hear them talking behind me, their voices muffled by the door. I didn't want to listen. I didn't want to hear what they had to say. As I reached my apartment, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a new message from Laura. "Are you okay?" she asked. I typed back, "Not really," then threw my phone onto the couch. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't put on a brave face. I was done with being strong. I was done with being Grace Miller, the overachiever, the one who never complained, the one who always picked herself back up. I was done. Suddenly, the door burst open and Olivia stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with surprise. "Grace, what's wrong?" She rushed over to me and wrapped me in a tight hug. And in that moment, I let go. I let go of all the pain, all the anger, all the sadness. I let it all out as tears streamed down my face. Olivia stroked my hair, her presence a soothing balm on my raw nerves. "It's okay," she whispered. "Let it out." I spent the next few hours telling Olivia everything that had happened. The fight with my parents, the hurtful words, the years of resentment. As I spoke, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. It was like a dam had broken inside of me and the floodgates of emotion had opened. When I was done, Olivia was crying too. "Oh, Grace," she said, pulling me into another tight hug. "I'm so sorry." "But it's not your fault," I said, pulling away from her. "You didn't do anything wrong," Olivia insisted. "Yes, I did," I said bitterly. "I let my parents treat me like this. I let them push me around. I let them gaslight me. I'm the one who's been harboring all this anger and resentment for years. I'm the one who's been holding on to the past. You weren't holding on to the past, Grace. You were holding on to hope, Olivia said softly. Hope that things would get better. Hope that you could forgive them. Maybe, I whispered, my mind racing. Olivia took my hand and squeezed it gently. You know what you need to do, she said. What do I need to do? I asked. Olivia smiled sadly. Let them go, she said. And in that moment, I knew she was right. I had spent so much of my life trying to please my parents, trying to make them proud, trying to be the perfect daughter, that I had forgotten who I was. I had forgotten that I was Grace, not their Grace, but my Grace. I was the one who got to decide how I lived my life. I was the one who got to decide what I wanted to do with my future. But what about the hurt? What about the pain? What about all the years of therapy I had gone through? I asked. Olivia's grip tightened on my hand. You can't change the past, Grace, she said. But you can choose to stop letting it define you. You can choose to move forward. And with that, I knew I had to let my parents go. It wouldn't be easy. It would be the hardest thing I had ever done. But it was something I needed to do for myself. The following Monday, I drove to my parents' house. It was a small, nondescript building in a quiet suburb. I had spent many happy days here, but those memories meant nothing now. All that mattered was the hurt, the pain, the betrayal. Taking a deep breath, I got out of my car and walked up to the door. I knocked timidly and waited. The door opened a crack and my mom's face appeared. Grace, she said, her eyes widening in surprise. Mom, I whispered, my throat tight with emotion. Can I come in? I asked. Mom hesitated, then stepped aside and let me enter the house. The living room was small but cozy. The walls were lined with family photos. I forced myself to look away from them and meet my parents' eyes. I'm sorry, I said, the words tumbling out of my mouth. I'm sorry for what I said. I didn't mean it. It's all right, honey, Mom said, rushing over to me. She pulled me into a tight hug, her body shaking with sobs. I'm sorry, I repeated, burying my face in her shoulder. I'm so sorry. She pulled away from me and cupped my face in her hands. What are you apologizing for, sweetheart? You don't owe us anything. I do, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I owe you an apology for being a terrible daughter, for not being there for you guys, for not listening. I'm sorry. Oh, Grace, Mom said, her voice breaking. We're the ones who are sorry. We should have been there for you, but we weren't. We're sorry. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with emotion. Suddenly, my dad cleared his throat. Grace, he said, his voice cracking. I know that nothing I say will ever be able to fix the past, but I want you to know that we love you very much. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Was this real? Were my parents actually apologizing to me? I love you too, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. We've made mistakes, Grace, Dad continued, his voice shaking with emotion. We know that we haven't been the best parents in the world, but please forgive us. I hesitated, torn between my anger and my love for them. But then I took a deep breath and said, I forgive you. The relief that washed over my parents' faces was palpable. It was as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. Thank you, Mom said, her voice trembling. We'll never take you for granted again, promise. We spent the rest of the day talking, sharing stories, and catching up on each other's lives. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a family again. As the sun began to set, I knew it was time for me to go. I hugged my parents tightly. I love you, I whispered. We love you too, they said in unison. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in years. I didn't dream of my parents or my childhood home. Instead, I dreamt of a new beginning. In the morning, I woke up feeling refreshed and renewed. I was still sad about leaving Philadelphia and my old life behind, but I knew it was for the best. I was moving on to bigger and better things. As I packed up my belongings, I came across a box filled with old photo albums. I sat down on the floor and began flipping through the pages. The photos brought back a rush of emotions, from laughter and joy to pain and sorrow. But as I looked at the smiling faces staring back at me, I knew that these memories were mine to cherish, not my parents'. They had given me life, but it was up to me to live it. With that thought in mind, I packed up the albums and headed to the airport. Saying goodbye to Olivia was hard, but I knew we would see each other again soon. As I boarded the plane, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. What lay ahead of me was unknown, but I was excited to find out. The flight to Boston was long, but it gave me time to reflect on everything that had happened. I had let go of my parents and my past. I was ready to embrace my future. When I arrived in Boston, I was met with a blast of cold air. The wind whipped around me as I stepped off the plane, but I didn't shiver. I was too busy taking in the sights and sounds of my new city. Over the next few months, I settled into my new life in Boston. I met new people, explored new places, and started my new job. I even found a new apartment that I loved. It wasn't easy, but I was getting there. One evening, as I was walking home from work, I came across a park. The leaves were changing colors, and the air was crisp and cool. I sat down on a nearby bench and closed my eyes, taking in a deep breath. I was grateful to be alive, grateful for the second chance at life that I had been given. As the weeks went by, I continued to heal and grow. I learned to love myself again and to accept my parents for who they were. I knew that they would never be perfect, but I also knew that they loved me. Looking back, I realized that everything had happened for a reason. The pain, the hurt, the anger, it had all been part of my journey. It had made me who I am today. A stronger, more resilient person. I wouldn't trade my experiences for the world, because they had taught me the most valuable lessons in life. I hope you enjoyed reading this story. If you did, please leave a like and share it with your friends. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.